Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. I don't think you could ask anybody and get a no answer this question. Do you not like music? Everybody loves music. There's just something about it that's personal. There's a connection, and it's also, as I've learned over the past number of weeks, therapeutic. And we're gonna riff on that, pun intended, a little bit longer with two gentlemen, starting with one who is the president of a great organization called Baltic Street into Action, which takes that music into action in helping people in all different situations improve their lives through music. And I just realized it today. We're talking about music here and the arts therapy. Peter Jampel joins us, and I realized in your last name, Jam, it's there, music. No, I never picked up on that. Hey, Peter.
Well, it's about time you did, Steve. Definitely, Peter, there's a Jam and the Jampel.
Love it.
Great to be here with you, and I'm so pleased to be able to present longtime colleague and friend of mine, Dr. Ken Agan. Ken is the director of the music therapy program at New York University. I could go on and on. He has done many things, both in clinically, in terms of his professional association work, his research. Today, what I'd like to focus on is Ken's background as a clinician and as a researcher in the Nordorf Robbins Music Therapy Center at NYU, his extensive knowledge and experience in working with people with autism in music. And in particular, Ken has evolved a belief in the particular, special, inherent, intrinsic qualities of music that cannot be replicated in other forms of expression. That music has particular properties that engage us in ways both socially and neurologically that only music can. So with that as a preamble, thank you, Ken, and welcome to the show.
Well, I'm really glad to be here. Of course, talking about music therapy and its connections to the use of music and the way people relate to music outside therapy is something I'm very committed to. It's something that connects people, because rather than the idea that people who are disabled get music therapy and everybody else just gets music, a lot of my work has been devoted towards breaking down that barrier and examining how folks with challenges or disabilities get the same things from music that we all do. The therapy comes from the fact that they have a hard time creating the conditions for that engagement on their own. And so what the music therapist's art is to help bring the intrinsic benefits of music to people for whatever reason, whether it's cognitive, motoric, emotional, or socioeconomic, can't create the engagement on their own.
So perhaps a way of approaching the work and understanding how it works and what it how the impact is experienced by people who receive music therapy services. Ken, you're a working musician. You've been working in a Grateful Dead tribute band, the Stella Blues Band, for many years as the keyboard player. And I think, having experienced the long-term involvement in working in music as a working musician, has created a context where you experience music yourself in your own life in a way that helps inform you about the ways in which your work with other people is reflected in your own experience. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. If you talk to people who decide to become music therapists, they'll all say a combination of, well, they love music, it means a great deal to them, and they want to help people. But if you think about it, every single music therapist had experience with music itself before they became a music therapist. So their desire to become a music therapist is rooted in just their non-clinical universal experience and engagement with music. For me, I'd have to go back to my early years in the mid and late 70s and being part of the Grateful Dead audience and feeling certain qualities of experience that I felt nowhere else. There was a way in which those concerts and those time periods brought people together, brought the audience into the moment, into the present moment, and created moments, experiences of healing within the context of a very special shared camaraderie. This camaraderie was among the audience members and between the audience and the band. So I had these experiences of, gosh, this is one of the most, if not the most powerful experiences I've ever had as a human being. Mm-hmm. And one of the most powerful ways of connecting with other people. I think when people connect in music, well, listen, there are all types of connections. People on a sports team feel connection. People in a nonprofit agency feel a connection to a mission. People in a religion feel a connection. But I think when people connect through music, it's unlike any other type of connection. And so my decision to become a music therapist, I think, was rooted in those early experiences. And, I think the problem is for a lot of music therapists, the need to explain their work in clinical, medical, scientific language makes them forget why they originally got into the field. They become the extrinsic rationale, which they use for pragmatic purposes. And something I promised myself was never to forget the origins, that what I hoped to bring my clients was rooted in what I experienced in my early 20s in those contexts.
Has anything changed? Because I feel what you're describing, and I will go to any live performance, anywhere, any genre, doesn't matter. I get judged from friends, like, you're going to see that? I'm like, yeah. And it's not even just about the music. It's about the connection. There's an energy. It's electric. There's just something being in a venue, whether it's 100 people watching somebody play guitar or a concert venue with 8,000, 14,000 people. There's just something, like you described, that collective connection. Has anything changed, or what has changed from back in the day, when you started talking about when you were in your 20s experiencing music?
Well, a couple of things. First, that special camaraderie, the musical communitas we all feel together, exists in many genres of music, not just in Grateful Dead or jam band music. It's as present in forms of heavy metal, hip hop, rave, EDM music. So it's not specific to one genre or group. I think one of the problems in this now is that recorded music has become so perfected because of the way that digital technology can be used to eliminate the imperfections in music. Music from the pre-digital age had imperfections. A guitar string stretched out. A vocalist was perhaps not precisely on the specific millimeter of pitch. Now, these things, what ethnomusicologists call participatory discrepancies, these are actually not, these imperfections are what makes music feel real. What makes it feel human? We are invited, we feel invited into music because it's imperfect.
Yep.
It's a reflection of our humanity. So what I fear happening is people who don't experience live music are expecting it to sound like it does on the recording. And I fear that the whole essence of music could possibly be lost through its so-called perfection through the use of digital technology. However, again, using my own experience as a musician in a Grateful Dead tribute band, I look in our audience, there are as many people in their 20s as there are in their 60s, which says to me there's an intrinsic, essential human need to experience humanity through music with other people. Yeah. And people get that once they're exposed to it. But again, my fear is that it will be lost.
By the way, I'm also a disc jockey. Have played music on the radio since I was 17. Paid professionally, so music geek here. And it's funny you talk about jam bands. Over the weekend, I got together with a friend, coworker, and he invited some of his friends over. And their thing is jam bands. They go to concerts, and I'm sitting there on the couch, and we're watching YouTube, and they're playing a band called Lettuce. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Sure.
And then we're like bouncing back and forth. I'm like, oh yeah, you like that? And then I'm like, yeah, what about the Brecker Brothers? They came out in the 70s. There's so many great songs that they did. And we're all from different ages, walks of life, and we're all converging on this one jam band theme. And it was magical. Bring it up on YouTube. Let's hear it. It connects people. Let's talk about the connection of music and therapy for people with autism, which is something, it's your specialty, I would say.
Yeah, I've worked with autistic folks since, way back, 1980 or so. And, there's something very interesting. So I was a psychology and philosophy major in undergrad school, University of Wisconsin, and I did what you can really do with a psychology and philosophy undergraduate degree. I went and played in a rock band for 2 years because there's nothing else I was really qualified to do with those 2 degrees. But, studying psychology in the mid-70s, we read about autistic people. They were supposed to be cold, emotionless, almost like automatons, without any humanity. Then a few years later, when I was a student at New York University, I started working with autistic children. They had a sense of humor. Some of them liked being hugged. Some of them liked laughing. They had some of the qualities we read about in the books, but I was like, either these books are wrong or these kids are not autistic. And it just, the thing before talking about autistic folks, I just want to acknowledge how in the last 40 years has been a complete sea change, where now autism is seen as a form of neurodiversity. It's the reason we talk about spectrum is that there's a whole spectrum of human functioning, and autistic folks exist on one end of that spectrum. And there's no, we don't have a right to ask someone to become less autistic any more than we'd have a right to take someone who's gay to be less gay. Now, homosexuality used to be a diagnosis in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. So it was a reason that someone needed therapy. But the world has changed, and in a much more benevolent turn, accepts diversity. So with autistic folks, I recently did a research study where I interviewed 29 autistic adults about their lifelong relationship to music, how they used music as a health resource, what it meant to them. Now, obviously, I'm dealing with a subset of autistic folks, those who are verbal and comfortable speaking. So we can't generalize everything I found there, but they do speak for a large proportion of autistic people. And so one of the main findings of this study was autistic folks get the same thing from music that everybody else does. Mm-hmm. And it's one way in which their connection to other people can be forged. Now, they have learned to use music in many ways to overcome their challenges, But the idea is that the world of an autistic person is quite different from the world of a neurotypical person. They experience, their senses act in a much different way. And so, what music does is create almost like a virtual reality in which people from very different experiential realms can meet in the overlap. And there are many different ways of doing music therapy, many different benefits of it. But if I were just to summarize in a sentence, hey, why music therapy for autistic folks? It's because there's a musical world in which people from very different experiential worlds can meet.
And, you know, of those 29 people that you interviewed, there is a subset of those people who perform music. And I think, we all are musical creatures. And for those of us who see music as an essential core aspect of who we are, whether we perform or just listen and love it, I think we can all connect on that. But performers are engaged in aspects of music making that are also particular to the experience of being a working musician and connecting as a musician to others. I hope, can you speak to what those people who are performing music, how it works for them, and perhaps give an example of how being a performer engages people in a very special way?
Sure. I think sometimes the word performance has a negative connotation, as if someone's engaged in a role that's not them or not human. But there's also another sense in that word, in that as human beings, we perform our identity in the world, and we try on ways of being that might otherwise be a little bit difficult for us. I can tell you a little bit about a man, and the people in my study agreed not to be anonymous, so I can use his name. His name is Jonathan Chase. He's a 36-year-old man, lives alone in Portland, Oregon, and he's a professional musician. He's an electric bass player. He's a high school dropout. He got a GED. I'll tell you a little about him. He studied with Victor Wooten, a world-class bass player, one of the best in the world, actually. But he was diagnosed at age 14, and his parents were given a really dire outlook about what he would be capable of, right? And what Jonathan said is that they put him through all these tests. One of them was a motor skills test, which he failed. It was a tapping test with his fingers. And so they were telling his parents, about what autism would mean for him. They said he'll never drive, he'll never live alone, he'll never have meaningful relationships, he'll never have a career, and his manual dexterity is so poor, he'll never work with his hands. Now, Jonathan is a world-class electric bass player, and his music career has given him a platform where he's also become an activist and a teacher, coach for other autistic people. He's given TED Talks. But I'll tell you one thing that he told me about in our interview. Actually, I'm going to quote him if it's okay. I'm sure I hate the idea that I'm always the bridge through which my participants speak, and sometimes I like to give you their words. Here's what Jonathan said about performing. When you get on stage, you put on a mask. I think in most live performance, whether it's theater or drama or comedy or even public speaking, most of the time when you're in front of a group of people, you're not really your true self. You have to put up some sort of barrier between you and them. So I started off with music where I felt like if I put this on, if I put this thing around my neck, this piece of wood, this bass guitar, I'm not me anymore. You can't be introverted on stage. You can't be shy when you're playing in a dance band. So I got to be someone else, and I liked that.
Mhm.
So the whole point was, because he's acting the role of a performer, he acquired the confidence that inheres in that role. And then, what he talks about is every skill that he learned in life, every way that he learned to be different came through music. Everything
Wow.
he's done that's really positive. He talks about how he could never have the courage to go and walk up to a girl, and start talking to her. But he could, with that bass, start playing Brick House by Parliament and get that girl up and moving. That was his way of inviting a connection with someone from the opposite sex.
Musicians always get the girls. and Parliament. Oh, we were talking about that the other night. Tear the roof off the sucker. What a great song. We're almost out of time. I really, really want to ask this question, so I guess we'll laser it. Do people with autism overall hear music the way we hear it?
Well, there are people who are starting to do research in this area. And I would say, I like the phrase, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, which really translates into autistic people as a class are just as heterogeneous as neurotypical people. Having said that, I will say that many of the people I interviewed talked about having synesthesia, where the music and tone would be associated with colors. And so neurotypical people have that experience as well. So what I would say is that unless you can get in someone else's mind, you don't know if they're hearing something the same way you or I are. But I think one thing we're exploring and that people are doing research into is there an autistic way of hearing? My sense is that there is a way of hearing music that characterizes some autistic people that's related to their autism, but it's not necessarily universal in that group of individuals.
Gotcha. Fascinating. Peter, want to wrap things up?
Yeah. So Ken, I think we've gotten a glimpse into the most current way of thinking about people with autism, and that in many ways, we're all human beings who experience music together, which is the essential feature of music making that creates authentic connections that are simply human. Ken, say for the listening audience how people can find out more about you, your work, and connect with you.
Sure. Well, I work at New York University. I'm very easy to find by email. Just Google New York University and music therapy, and my name and contact information will appear. So I think that's the easiest way. There's also an American Music Therapy Association for people who just want to find out more about the field in general, and they're at musictherapy.org.
Wonderful talking with both of you today. Learned so much. And Ken, you just have a way of making it easy to understand and relatable to all of us. Final question. Best ever Grateful Dead song. Which one?
Come on, I can answer that. You can ask me what I love playing.
Okay.
Well, you know how they're, listen, for the lyrics, Broke Down Palace, that song, and the song Comes a Time. It has some of the most beautiful lines. You can't separate the music from the lyrics.
Comes a Time now is, I'm not familiar with that song from the Grateful Dead.
You've got to read the lyrics.
However, I am familiar with Comes a Time by Neil Young. There's no connection, right?
No connection whatsoever.
Got it.
And to play the song Scarlet Begonias, it's just one of my favorites. So
Gotcha.
There you go.
Yeah, love it all. Thank you both for being here today. Truly appreciate it.
Okay, thanks for the
Take care.
talk.
Thank you. We'll
Good
be
to
right
be
back.
with you.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Of course my kid's in the right car seat. Well, I think he is.
Yeah, my kid's in a booster seat. He was ready to move up. He is ready, right?
Her car seat looks like the right size.
There are probably rules on when to move up to a booster seat, aren't there?
Rear facing, forward facing. I think I have it right.
Car crashes are a leading killer of children 1 to 13. Are your children in the right car seat for their age and size? Don't think you know you know. Go to safercar.gov/the right seat.
I know my child's in the right car seat, or else I wouldn't get in the driver's seat.
Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.